Good afternoon. I'm Anuj Mehrotra. I'm the Dean of the School of Business at George Washington University, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you who are here today in person or watching online to this session of George Talks Business. Today, I'm delighted to introduce our guest, Marty Rodgers, who is the Market Unit Lead for US South for Accenture. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dean.
Thank you for being here. It's so great having you today, Marty.
Very honored, very privileged to be here. And I was checking out the video and just some of the names you've had before coming through the school. Very honored to be here. David Rubenstein, the mayor. I know the mayor's coming back. And then you also, I said once publicly, that's why it's interesting to see, but Roger Ferguson is one of the CEOs I looked up to most in my career. And so to see him on the video was very fitting. So
Well, good to know you belong in this crowd. Thank you for coming here again.
Awesome.
Let me start with your career that you started with Capitol Hill before you joined Accenture.
Yep.
I'm trying to connect the dots. How does working in the Capitol Hill help you work at Accenture and in consulting? And perhaps if you could take some time also to kind of tell us about how Accenture as a consulting company is different from some of the other consulting companies. And maybe that's what Capitol Hill got to do with it. So I'll let you answer that.
yeah, so I think the easiest way just to describe my career journey is just to say I'm an old school liberal arts major, and I believe very much in the idea of following the question where it leads. And so I had a very vague idea coming out of undergrad that I believe that the nonprofit sector, the for-profit sector, and government all needed to work together in order to solve the big challenges of our time. And so coming out of undergrad, that's exactly what I did. I started working in for-profit, then I went to nonprofit, then I went to government in Capitol Hill, and then because of the work I was doing on Capitol Hill, I actually went and did service work. And then that's what then led me to grad school and then to joining Accenture. And in terms of a lead into the next part of that, Dean, to your question, I look at consulting as sort of the liberal arts for business, right? Ultimately, the magic happens when you bring people of different backgrounds, different expertise, different capabilities from different industries, from different skill sets, whether that's in our strategy and consulting area, our technology area, our operations area, our ventures area, our innovation area. Ultimately, the power is not when one of those disciplines is looking at a problem, it's when all the different areas come together to look at the same problem. And the same thing it happens to be true in liberal arts, right? When you're looking at a problem, if you only look at it through the economic lens or you only look at it sociology lens, you only get one sort of an answer. But when you combine it, that's where you get richness, that's where you get robustness, that's where you get a fullness of solution, and that's where you get a better answer. And so my journey has been about following the question where it leads, and the question that I've been trying to pursue and follow is how can we bring together all three sectors to tackle the great issues of our time of healthcare, the environment, of social justice, and work together to make a difference in a meaningful way and change the way that the world works and lives.
Very interesting. So your title, Marty, is Market Unit Lead for US South at
Yep.
Accenture.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about what that means, what the responsibilities and roles are,
Right.
role is, and you have folks working worldwide.
Right.
So you are in DC. So how does the location in DC perhaps plays a role in trying to really manage a worldwide operation?
Yeah,
Tell us a
sure.
little bit about
Yeah,
that.
so fantastic question, Dean. So Accenture is a global company. We have over 624,000 people across 120 different countries, 200 cities. How you make it work is sometimes through the magic of technology and through hard work. I was on this morning at 7 a.m. with all of our leaders in India that are supporting all of our South accounts. And talking to them and trying to inspire them around the challenges that we have ahead in the new fiscal year. So, ultimately for us, I have a little over 17,000 people in the U.S. South that I'm responsible for, and then I have many thousands more that are nearshore or offshore that are supporting our South accounts in addition to that. And then in terms of Accenture and how we compete and what we do, the easiest way to think about Accenture is we're the if you're thinking about the consulting industry, we're the fullest of the full service firm. So Harvard Business School and The Economist and others have talked about, what is the consulting industry? What does it do? Where is it evolving? Where is it going? There are kind of two prototypical models. There's sort of the niche firms, and then there's the full service firms. The niche firms are sort of epitomized by the Bains, the BCGs, and the McKinseys, and they do one thing and they do one thing well, right? It's hey, I do strategy and consulting, or I'm only going to do healthcare, or hey, I'm only going to be focused on this one region, or I'm just going to do nonprofits, or just going to do government consulting, right? The full service firms attempt to service multiple industries. They attempt to service multiple geographies. And then they have a range of services and products and offerings that they're bringing to their clients to be a one-stop shop, so that we can take you all the way from coming up with the idea, coming up with the innovation, coming up with the strategy and the assessment, from handing you a deck, handing you a piece of paper, all the way through doing the technology, the operations, the execution of that idea, so that we're helping you with your digital journey. We're helping you with your cloud journey. We're helping you run your HR. We're helping you run your finance. We're helping you run your procurement. We're helping you do your claims, your loan processing, and all the rest across the whole range of all the different sectors and 40 different industries. So ultimately, in this industry, you're either going to go all the way of being fully niche, or you're going to go fully full service, and we're the fullest of the full service, right? If you think about it that way, those are the two strategic bets that we're placing. And if you're somewhere in the middle, you're going to be roadkill, Dean. That's kind of what's going to happen. You're going to get run over. You're not going to survive in the middle. And so our industry is going in this direction. We've got lots of people trying to catch up to us and follow us in this direction, and there's others going in this direction. Our bet is to be the fullest of the full service firms and to service our clients as a one-stop shop, and that's what's been key to our growth and to a growth that is accelerated past. Even though we're now the largest, we're still growing faster than the rest of the market.
Awesome. So you mentioned you're a full-service consulting company. So let me put that to a live test here.
Okay, here we go.
Perhaps give you a consulting, potentially a consulting opportunity
right,
here.
Bring it.
So,
I'm ready.
So think about this. Now, we are a business school in one of the world's fantastic cities here with our location.
Yes.
We are doing great things here.
Amazing things, innovative
Thank you.
things.
So the value of our business school
brilliant
is
dean
huge,
at the helm too. Brian. Yes.
Huge value to a business school. Tell us, if this were a consulting assignment, tell us, how do we build on this? And more importantly, I have always dreamt about having a career in consulting. I also want to understand, how do you price a consulting assignment? So if the task was, how do we get the right person to name the school, for example, what would that kind of a problem entail? How would you analyze? How would you charge for it? What teams will work on it? How long will it take? And will the charge be more than the amount that we will end up getting for the naming of the school, or less? I also want to understand that.
It'll definitely be less, just to be clear. And I think let me just kind of abstract from what you were just describing. So first, what you just hit on is one of those key strategic questions for where the future of the industry is going. And increasingly, where the industry is going to be going is, right now, across the industry, it's still very much a headcount-based model. It's still very much, hey, you're going to go out, you're going to work a number of hours, you're going to charge a certain rate times per hour, and for us, you're going to have a certain cost per hour, and the difference is what our profit is, right? Well, that model is, we believe, increasingly going away, and increasingly where the industry wants to go and where we want to take the industry, because as the industry leader, we have to shape the future of where it's going. And what we're talking to our clients about and where we're trying to take the industry is to be much more value-led and to say, okay, well, moving forward, let's guarantee you an outcome. Let's talk about what the value of guaranteeing you an outcome means versus a rate times hour. Or let's say, increasingly, you know what, we're so confident in this idea and our ability to deliver this idea that we want you to pay us, as opposed to rate times hour, we want you to pay us based on how much we save you. We want you to pay us based on how much new revenue we bring in. Or even increasingly, with all the disruption that's taking place right now, Dean, increasingly what we're looking at is more and more clients are saying, you know, if you're so confident in this idea, let's go into business together. Let's do this together. And that's increasingly what the next horizon is, getting away from this rate times hour, getting away from the idea that, you're going to go from 600,000 to 700,000, and it's always
Mhm.
going to be rate times hour, moving into what's the value we're delivering, and then let's monetize that value and
Mhm.
monetize the value that's created together, working together. In terms of your question about naming the
Yeah,
business
I
school,
wasn't
so
going in the direction of Accenture School of Business, and
uh,
but certainly
oh,
that's what I think
I
you're
thought
going with,
I thought we were naming it
partnering.
after you. So I thought based on 3 years of great service since 2018 and all the innovation you brought, we were going to name it after you. So that's where I thought we were going. Um, but in terms of the consulting assignment, that would normally fall under our strategy and business
Mhm.
strategy and consulting part of the firm. They would be working with you. They'd go out and they would talk to a variety of different folks about what's the business school known for, where does it want to go, what
Mhm.
are you aspiring to do, and who would be the right fit, both from a brand standpoint, but also from a values standpoint. Is
Mhm.
the key thing I think you'd want to emphasize.
Well, thank you for that. So you mentioned there's a lot of disruption going on. One of the
Yep.
things that we have heard a lot about is the Great Resignation, and then
Mhm.
we hear that Accenture has in the last year hired 100,000 people. Have you hired
Mhm.
everybody who has resigned from every other job? Is that how you're building up your team? So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that, and when you're hiring so many people
Right.
in worldwide, how do you incorporate the company culture, and how
Yeah.
do you make sure that people are onboarded in a way where they belong?
Yeah. Yeah. So great questions, and it's a tremendous challenge. So um, the long story short of where we are with COVID, right, is we went through a very a massive downturn that quickly, the rebound has been even more stark and more steep. And as a result of that, we have had to do a variety of different things. The first is um, we've had to work very hard to retain our own people. The challenges that folks have had to face as a result of COVID and both the suddenly we had 95% of our people almost instantly having to go and work from home, do this on a global basis. The disruption that meant, the threat of kind of healthcare challenges, mental health challenges, having to invest in our people in terms of training them on the new way of working, training them on new skills and capabilities that they were going to need as the business dramatically shifted in terms of what our clients were buying and how they were buying. It was a massive investment in the capabilities of our people. Like literally, even though everybody was virtual and we didn't have the in-person costs, our training budget still went up year over year as a result of COVID. We gave over 31 million hours of training in 1 year. We ended up, that's a 4% increase in terms of our overall training budget as well. We spend roughly $1 billion a year training our people. In terms of so at the one hand, you've had this huge, massive need to have empathy for our people, train our people, retain our people, and start literally each and every day recruiting our own people every day. Because part of the great resignation is this broader questioning of what's my purpose? What's my impact? Can you tell me where I'm going in terms of my career journey? Is that a career journey that I want to be on? And so we want to be able to tell our own people, here is where we're going. Here is how this is a business that's about client service, about making a difference, about having impact. Here's your role in that in the broader context. After that piece, you then have this need, as you describe, of bringing in additional talent because we grew faster last year during COVID than we've ever grown before, and we're projected again to grow faster than we've ever grown before. So this coming fiscal year, and when you're the size and scale that we are, what that ends up being when you're both replacing people that you've lost because of higher than expected attrition, and I'll come back to that in a second with the culture, but also when you're hiring to get the additional people that you need for that growth, we didn't hire 100,000. We actually hired 200,000 because we had to replace some of the folks that we lost, plus add in the net new folks that we needed for the additional growth in the hot skill areas that we already were investing in and that we needed to pivot to in terms of where the business is going. In addition to that, we are also the most acquisitive firm on the planet right now. So we increased our acquisitions to get additional skills, additional capabilities from around $1.5 billion to a little under $1.5 billion to now about $4 billion a year. Forbes had named us the most acquisitive firm in the world last year, and we'll probably be that again this year. And then last but not least, coming back to your question, Dean, because it's so spot on, we're challenged with this question of, in this virtual world, how do you create culture? How do you create a sense of place and of belonging? And in this environment, it's particularly tough, right? Because um, very directly, we have over 100,000 people that we have hired that have never met an Accenture person, have never been in an Accenture office. So how do you create that sense of belonging place, and make them feel that they're part of something bigger than themselves? And so that's really what we're trying to invent and to work on. We have a number of different things that we've been trying to do. We have a huge effort around training and around social connection that we're doing with Oculus glasses that we're rolling out in the tens of thousands to our people. We're slowly but surely doing a return to office, and we're very deliberately focusing and have changed our overall purpose and brand as a company to be much more about what is the impact you're having, what's the purpose that you're having, and us as a ethical and responsible company that people want to be a part of.
No, thank you for that. And you mentioned several challenges, which I
Yeah.
think were uniformly faced in every part of the world, for that matter. But there is yet another challenge that
Okay.
I think which has really come up front completely in front of our eyes is a very divided country, for example,
Mhm.
and very divided thoughts and opinions,
Yeah.
where one side cannot really talk to the other side. I'm wondering whether that shows up in the corporate world as well, um, through certain regulations or
Mm.
policies that different companies have.
Mhm.
And if they are showing up in your clients, for example, how do you balance that?
Mm.
How do you, or is that something that just never comes up in the professional world?
Oh no, it comes up all the time. So our employees. Well, let's step back for a second on COVID. So first, I would pro offer this idea that COVID fundamentally changed the relationship between um, how we interact with our clients and the expectation of our clients, the expectation of our community partners, and the expectation of our employees. And in all cases, I believe it raised the bar. There's an expectation now that I want this relationship to be long term, not short term. I want it to be. I don't want it to be transactional. I want to know that you have your skin in the game. I want to know that you're in it for both personally and professionally. That you're vested in our mutual success and our shared success. And so, as part of that, we have uh, a broader expectation from our employees that we're going to be about not just our shareholders, but about stakeholders. We're going to be about making the world a better place, not just both. So we're about both profits and purpose. And there's a increasing expectation that we are going to use our voice, we're going to use our power, we're going to use our resources, time, talent, and treasure to make a difference on the big issues of our time. And so that's in the U.S. South, Dean, like we've seen it loud and clear, right? We've been asked to comment on vaccines, on voting rights, on issues of social justice in the wake of the lethal tragedies of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor. We've been asked to deal with challenging circumstances and situations of Asian hate, like across the board. And so, in each cases, in all of those cases, we're asked to rise. We're asked to represent what do we reflect in terms of our values and what do we stand for. Um, and in so doing, I think all companies are being asked to increasingly do that. But some of us that are trying to be out front, we have even a higher responsibility. So one of the things that we pride ourselves on and that we aspire to be is we aspire to be the most diverse and inclusive firm on the planet, bar none. That is in keeping with our desire to be the most innovative firm on the planet and our desire to grow faster than all of our competitors, and the firm with the best talent wins. And so we are focused on this idea. And 2 of the last 4 years, we've been named the most diverse and inclusive firm on the planet. But we know it's a journey. We're just, we're on that journey, and we're trying to um, be better about that journey, not just for ourselves, but for the communities where we work and live, and for also our clients, and to work with them to try to tackle some of the big issues around diversity in our country and about bringing people together. The last thing I'll just share, if it's okay, is just around this broader question of right now at this moment, at this time in our country and in our history, right? Especially as we now begin to come out of the pandemic, I think we're all called, we're all asked this fundamental question, both individually and collectively as firms, but also even more broadly writ large in society. COVID can cause us, and in some sense caused us to retreat inside, right? It caused us to go home. It caused us to only interact with those immediately around us, right? And we can allow that, and even when you get online, right, there's still this tendency where when you get online, you're just interacting with all your peer groups, right? And some of the challenges that you've seen on the front pages around Facebook and other platforms that are out there, there's this question of, okay, are we using technology to open our aperture? Are we using it to um, have broader perspectives, broader debate, better dialogue, better discourse? Or is it closing our aperture and is it leading to more and more tribalism, right? And I think our question as we come out of the pandemic, and especially for institutions of higher education, is how do we ask the question and ask people as part of their journey to say, you know what, I'm going to open my aperture. I'm going to have dinner with folks I've not had dinner with before. I'm going to place myself in circumstances I haven't placed myself in before as part of my journey of learning, of growing, of developing, and of reaching out and changing how I look at the world and how I bring people together as we try to redefine and remake and rebuild the ties that bond and the ties that bind.
So those are some excellent points that you made, Marty, obviously. And you really hit upon some of the diversity, equity, and inclusion kind of ideas that are, of course, at this point at the forefront in almost every company and every organization and every institution, for
Absolutely.
that matter.
Yep.
And yet, there are times when people don't necessarily buy into it.
Mm.
So how does a leader convince the entire institution or entire company or entire organization that this is not lip service,
Yeah.
that this is something real, and and how what kind of actions or best practices, for example, that you
Yeah.
may have
Absolutely.
seen
Yeah.
that work in that process?
Yeah, so great question, and I think this is true for a variety of different things, right? It's not just DEI, but it's also sustainability and all of these other issues that are emerging as part of a broader ESG framework. But since your question was on DEI, let me answer that directly. We have always been committed to inclusion and diversity. Our CEO, who at the time was our North America CEO, now is our global CEO, and we're one of, I believe, the only top 50 Fortune 500 company that has two women at the top of our ticket, right? Where our top two officers are women. Well, when our CEO was the head of North America, she said, you know what, we're doing great on inclusion diversity, but we're going to take it to the next level. And part of that was because we had to bet our firm on this idea of moving towards innovation and being innovation led and no longer the fast follower. But since we were number one in the industry, we had to continue to innovate from the front and take our clients there and take our business there. And so we bet the firm on this idea of innovation and this idea of we needed the diversity of thought and of background and of experience in order to drive that innovation. And so we went from leading in diversity to doing it on steroids. And we said, across the board, we're going to do some really bold and courageous things. The first thing we did was, as a tech firm and a professional services firm, we became the first one to release all of our data publicly. And we said, you know what, we're going to track this data and we're going to report on it every year. Because there's a belief that what you measure is what you're going to get. And there's also a belief that light brings heat and transparency builds trust. And so that's where we first started. That was really a clarion call and a challenge to everybody else in professional services and in technology. We then took that further and said, you know what, the next thing is to set bold and audacious goals. And so we said in 2017 that by 2025, and we're gonna beat this, but we were gonna get to gender parity, which for a tech firm on a global basis, that's gonna be 50-50 women, is extraordinary. I was with the team in India this morning. We were just celebrating all of our South teams are now 50-50 women and men. We also made bold goals around ethnicity and gender subsequent to some of the challenges of recent years. We had them internally and now we've made them externally. We also said and committed to not just learning internally, but sharing that externally with our clients and our community partners in terms of what our story has been and what our journey has been. And then last but not least, in terms of where we are and where we're going, um, it is a uh, fundamentally for us a business issue. This is not a nice thing to do. It is a matter of our very survival. And again, as I said earlier, the firm with the best people win. So our ability to attract and retain the best people, folks want to come work at diverse institutions. They want to come work where they can be challenged and learn from others. And so what we've been able to prove since we started that kind of diversity on steroids is this is not about scarcity, it's about abundance. And so we have dramatically grown the size of our pie, lifted all boats. And when we do anything that makes things better for any one of our groups from a diversity standpoint, it makes things better for all. And so we've created fantastic new amounts of um, both shareholder and stockholder value as a result of our investments in diversity.
Awesome. I could continue asking you many, many questions, but I do want to give an opportunity for anybody in the audience. If you have a question, if you could line up, and certainly I'll come to that question in that case. But
Okay.
while they are thinking about their
Sure.
question and lining up, let me leave you
Sure.
with one other question first.
Absolutely.
You started mentioning some of the folks who have really influenced your life or influenced your career. And I would love to hear from you as being in this industry for a long time, clearly being in a leading roles.
Yeah.
Some elements on what you think are important to define leadership.
Great question. So, if it's okay, I'm not actually going to go to my Accenture leadership because we were just talking about one of them, but I'm going to actually go to some of my other mentors and sponsors and some of my other heroes and sheroes that I've worked with on the journey, and in so doing, share some of the lessons of leadership. So, um, first, in terms of definition of leadership and what leadership is all about. Um, I had the honor, you mentioned earlier, of working on Capitol Hill. One of the folks that I worked with was Congressman John Lewis, and we worked together to create a national day of service in honor of Martin Luther King, who was his colleague and his friend. He believed, as the senator that I had worked with, a gentleman by the name of Harris Wofford, he believed that both of them believed that it should be a day on, not a day off, a day of action, not apathy, a day of service, not shopping and sales. And so I wrote a piece of legislation. Couldn't sleep one night. Wrote it in the wee hours of the morning. We worked together for that to become law and to change this into a national day of service. John Lewis was always fond of saying that about the importance of both the consistency and the constancy of hope and of optimism, and that those were fundamental attributes of leadership, and that he and Dr. King would both say you have to lead from the front, not from the back, and that you have to be headlights, not taillights. And so that's one quick lesson of leadership. Another quick couple of ones that I'll just leave you with. One of our clients that we worked with at America's Promise was Colin Powell, who I know is a distinguished graduate of this institution. Colin Powell was fond of saying that leadership ultimately is about simplifying, about clarifying, and about communicating. Right? Simplify, clarify, communicate. And I think that's a really, really simple message and direct message to take with us. And then last but not least, one of my sheroes in life and that I've had a chance to work with before I went to Capitol Hill is a remarkable woman of grace by the name of Dr. Marian Wright Edelman, who's the president and founder of the Children's Defense Fund. And Marian was the first Black woman lawyer in the state of Mississippi, and she was called to go there by Medgar Evers as a young law school graduate and to work for civil rights. And she stayed after he was assassinated in his driveway. And Marian spent the next 50 years of her life fighting for civil rights and for children and the world's leading children's advocate. And she's fond of saying that service is the rent we pay for living. Service is the rent we pay for living. And the notion behind that, right, is that we're all called to serve, we're all called to make a difference. And, you know, whether it's public service, military service, national and community service, or client service, we're all called to make a difference regardless of our stage of life. We're all asked to pay the rent, and the rent doesn't magically get paid at the end of the month, right? You got to put the time in, whether it's the rent payment or the mortgage payment. It doesn't magically show up at the end of the month if you're not putting the work in during the week and during the day. And so those would be kind of three quick thoughts on leadership just to share with you. And from heroes and sheroes on my journey.
Excellent, excellent. So we do have a
Sure.
question from the audience. Please state your name and ask your question.
Sure. Hi, Mr. Rodgers. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sophia, and I have a question on mentorship. So
Sure.
in GWSB, we have plenty of opportunities, whether it's the Career Center or in the classroom or in student organizations, for mentorship. And I know you've spoken to some leaders today, and there's also a coaching model at Accenture. I'm wondering, how do you extract both the most from both the mentor and the mentee experience in that relationship?
Yeah. So, Sophia, first, thanks for that question. I think it's awesome. I talk a lot about both mentorship and sponsorship because both are equally important. A mentor is somebody that walks with you on the journey, somebody that is there to help guide you. A sponsor is somebody that actually clears the path for you, that actually can take obstacles out of the way or help you speed up on the journey because they're sitting at the table and have power. The key thing for mentors, I always tell people you want mentors in and outside of where you're working. You want more than one. Same thing's true for sponsors. And that ultimately the key to success for a mentor-mentee is fit, communication, and again, this idea of consistency and making sure that you're developing a relationship because both people have to put something in order to make it work and make it valuable. And that your responsibility to your mentor as a mentee and in turn that mentor to you as a mentee, those are really bonds of trust and of affection, and that they only grow if you invest in their growth.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And time passes by very quickly when you're
Indeed.
having fun, and our
Indeed.
time is up. But thank you
Thank you.
very much. What a pleasure. What
Thank
a
you.
wonderful comments today. Thank you.
Awesome.
I also want to thank all of you who have joined us today in person or have been watching online. Thank you again for joining. And next week, our distinguished guest will be DC Mayor Muriel Bowser. We will be hosting this particular session also in person. I'd like to thank Tanya Vogel and her team in athletics for their help with hosting the next session at the Tin Tabernacle Club at the Smith Center. So that's a great partnership to have with athletics. And Tanya, thank you for that. Again, thank you for joining us and see you next week.
Awesome.